Hello, time for a Man and Great book review. Today's book is Sonata by Jackie Kay, published in 2006 by Picador Books as part of their Picador Shots book series. It's 64 pages long. Sonata is a feminist retelling of Leo Tolstoy's famous novella, The Kreutzer Sonata. So if you're not familiar with that, let me just quickly summarize Tolstoy's book. There's a long train ride, and a man on the train gets into a philosophical discussion about marriage. A woman on the train argues that marriage should be for love and not be arranged. She was against the idea of arranged marriage, and you should fall in love and marry who you love. And this guy says that that's a terrible idea because men and women can't have healthy relationships if it's based on love, because what happens is the love fades, the initial attraction fades, and then you're left with only two emotions, jealousy and lust. And to prove his point, he tells a story about his own tragic marriage. He gets married and he's very much in love, but before long, he begins to resent his wife. The love kind of fades out, and they constantly get into fights with one another and arguments, but they stay together because he's sexually attracted to her. He can't get away from her, and they keep having children. She eventually has 5 children by him, but he's absolutely miserable, and everything comes to a head. She's a pianist, and it comes to a head when she decides to start practicing Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata for piano and violin with a handsome young violinist. And the husband becomes intensely jealous of this violinist, and he becomes convinced that the two of them are having an affair behind his back and making a fool of him. He goes on a trip, and he gets a letter from her saying that they're still practicing, and so he decides to come back and try to catch them in the act. And he comes back, and he finds the two of them in their house, but they're both sitting at a table, not in the bedroom or anything. But he flies into this jealous rage, pulls out a knife, and stabs his wife to death. And the violinist flees and escapes. But the husband is not sent to prison because he convinces everybody that his wife was unfaithful to him, and it was a justifiable murder. So that's of course, when this book came out, it was scandalous. In fact, the czarist authorities banned it and censored it because of its attitude. Tolstoy's basic position, and what he argues in the story, is that people should be sexually abstinent. That it's the sexual attraction between men and women that leads to all this disaster. And so it was then and is still today kind of a controversial viewpoint. Now, in this retelling, in Jackie Kay's retelling, the setting is up. It's still in Russia, but the time is updated to the 21st century. There's another long train trip, but this time the discussion's between two women, and it turns out that one of the women on the train has had this passionate affair with another woman, a same-sex relationship. And she starts describing this relationship and how they were deeply in love. And in the first part of the novella, it kind of tracks Tolstoy's story pretty carefully, or pretty similarly. They fall in love, but the pianist is beautiful, and the woman that falls for her is not. She's rather plain. And she begins to doubt herself because her lover is so much more beautiful than she is. And she grows to resent her pianist lover. And the pianist begins to quit sleeping with her. And she starts becoming interested in this female violinist, and they decide to play a sonata together for charity. And this, of course, makes the other woman very, very jealous. And so that part tracks pretty closely. She decides, the jealous partner decides to talks her into having them get together in their apartment and hold a private concert, kind of as a dress rehearsal for the sonata that they're going to play. And so she meets this violinist for the first time and becomes insanely jealous of her. But there's not a murder. This is where the story veers off from Tolstoy's. After their concert together, they do get into a violent argument. The pianist says, "You're nuts. I'm not having an affair. You don't know. You know what you're talking about. And she decides, I can't live with you anymore because you're too insanely jealous and crazy. And so she leaves. And then they meet together. They run in together to each other later. And the pianist reveals that what happened to the violinist. Something happens to the violinist, I should say. I don't want to tell you what it is, but there's a tragic ending, but it's not a murder. So it's different from the Tolstoy thing. It ends tragically. And the other difference between this version and the original is that in the original story, the listener in the train is basically just there as a plot device so that the guy can tell his story about his unhappy, tragic marriage. But in this version, the other woman who's listening to this story, the woman's story about their relationship, she begins to fall in love with the woman in the train just from listening to her story. She loves the sound of her voice, and she feels sorry for her. She has a lot of compassion, and she begins to realize, I'm falling for this woman. And then when they get to the end of the train ride, she can't decide whether to try to strike up a relationship with her and keep seeing her after they leave the train ride, or whether she should just let it go. And so she's kind of torn between what to do there. So it's a very witty reimagining of the Kreutzer Sonata. You don't have to have read Tolstoy's book to understand this, to appreciate this. It stands on its own as a separate story, but you'll get a lot more out of it if you've read the Kreutzer Sonata by Leo Tolstoy, because you'll see kind of the witty parallels and the kind of feminist spin that she puts on this rather misogynistic story. I mean, Tolstoy had a lot of issues with women, like so many 19th century writers did, male writers did. So anyway, I think you'll enjoy this book, especially if you're a fan of Tolstoy. The book is Sonata. The author is Jackie Kay. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.